How's it going, everybody? This is Sebastian Fonseca, back again with another episode of Spectator Sports, episode number 73. Before we get into breaking down Week 5's action across the NFL, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and you can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. All links are in the description. I grew up in a Baltimore suburb, so we get a ton of Ravens-Steelers games, and I grew up on this historic rivalry budding into what it is today. I've seen Ben Roethlisberger go up against Ray Lewis, and then you see Ed Reed, T-Sizzle with Troy Polamalu, Hines Ward. The list goes on and on. There's some iconic players in this rivalry, and now we're getting a next generation of that with like TJ Watt, Lamar Jackson, who's been a little bit absent from this rivalry due to injury, but it's good to see him back on the field. And then you get Kenny Pickett and George Pickens as well. And this game was typical AFC North rivalry between these two teams. Physical, tough-nosed defenses, not a lot of offense there. The final score was 17-10, and that is a very indicative of it being a defensive slugfest. The Steelers scored 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter in some of the most unconventional ways possible. It was 10-3. First thing that happened was you get a safety that nearly was a touchdown, but it went out before the special teams member could recover it in the end zone for the touchdown, so they still got 2 points. Next drive, you cash that in for 3 points off the free kick, and you're down 10-8. Meanwhile, the Ravens offense is starting to sputter. Despite them getting off to a 10-0 start in the first half, they stagnated for the rest of the game. They were greedy in unnecessary times and just a lot of self-inflicted mistakes that we'll break down. But in that fourth quarter stretch, you had an opportunity to really put this game out of reach after forcing a muff punt and recovering it deep inside Pittsburgh territory. At that point, it is 10-8. Bare minimum, what you could do is get a field goal, and it's up to 5 with Kenny Pickett and the offense really struggling to even get into field goal range. So that's a cushion for your defense. But Lamar forces a throw on 3rd and goal that I think he wants to have back. That instead of going to OBJ back shoulder, he kind of goes in no man's land, and it gets the DB a chance to make a play on the ball. Great play by Joey Porter Jr., actually the son of Joey Porter Sr., who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a linebacker. Great play, gives the Steelers some life, and this was a chance for that George Pickens, Kenny Pickett connection to finally hit home, get a touchdown to go up 14-10 in the fourth quarter. Now, Lamar still has a chance to get the job done, but doesn't feel that pressure, gets stripped. TJ Watt recovers it. They had 3 more insurance points, and yet again ran out of time for the Baltimore Ravens, and they dropped this game, dropped to 3-2 on the year. And the Steelers are now atop the AFC North after starting off 0-1 in a very embarrassing opening day loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Looked pretty rough against the Houston Texans last week, but find ways to win, especially in the division. They got 2 divisional wins against, I think, teams that are better than them on paper, at least, with the Cleveland Browns, and then later against the Baltimore Ravens, who I think are still favorites even after this loss in Week 5. The Ravens offense looks very clunky still. No matter how many times the Ravens front office has invested in the wide receiver position with OBJ, Duvernay, Rashad Bateman, countless other names, they just can't put another guy to go alongside Mark Andrews, the Pro Bowl tight end. And yes, Zay Flowers, great addition with this draft class, but he is a rookie and a little bit more of that speedy gadget player. He's still trying to figure out what his best plays are in the NFL. He's a deep threat, definitely a guy that you want to get the ball to him in space, but still learning the route tree. And Lamar is a guy that needs to be a little bit more careful with the ball. Like I said, that interception, I think that's more on him rather than Odell Beckham Jr. And the strip sack is something that he needs to feel that pressure with a little bit better. But still, he put them in positions to succeed for much of this game. They were plagued by drops, and there were countless drops. Even Mark Andrews dropped one. Then you saw Rashad Bateman drop a ball. And then a couple of bad drops by Nelson Aguilar. And me being an Eagles fan, I've seen this movie before. countless times. It's kind of his last chance to really carve out a career in the NFL, and this didn't do him any favors on Sunday. And we're getting a really weird report from ESPN, at least heading into this matchup, that wide receiver coach Greg Lewis, a former receiver in the NFL, is coaching the Ravens pass catchers how to catch a ball with a rugby ball. And for those who don't know, a rugby ball is greatly different than an NFL football. It's bigger, it's a little bit more stout compared to the more oblong oval shape that you have with an NFL football, and it's opening up the hands to be a lot wider than a typical football would be. And that's maybe not the reason why they had the case of the drops on Sunday, but odd technique. I know it's about gripping the ball. That's the whole point of it. It's just trying to complicate a very simple practice where you should just focus on the ball in the sport that you actually play. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have been having a lot of chance for fire Matt Canada. The offense is still looking clunky in its own. For much of this game, they really struggled to move the ball. There's no running lanes for Najee Harris. I know he has problems seeing the hole and hitting the hole, but the offensive line isn't even opening up holes on a regular basis. He's averaging less than 3 yards a carry in that game on Sunday. And then with the receivers, without Deontay Johnson, it's really George Pickens or bust. And you didn't even have Pat Fryermuth out there either, the tight end. So it was very limited for the passing offense. Yes, so injuries maybe help out Matt Canada, but there's not a lot of variety here. And they were saved in the fourth quarter thanks to that touchdown by George Pickens. But a lot of people are dissecting this whole reaction that Matt Canada didn't show a lot of emotion there. And there are going to be conspiracy theorists out there saying he was mad about the audible. I don't know. I'm not here to really speculate on that, but something to bring to note to the audience here. So we'll see what happens with Pittsburgh. I think their offensive woes are still going to cost them games because their defense, as good as they may be with TJ Watt, they're missing Cam Hayward, who's a great defensive lineman in this league. That's something that's going to be sorely missed. And they can win them some games, but that offense really needs to pick up their slack because now it seems that Joe Burrow and the Bengals are picking up too. He's getting healthier. They had a good day against the Cardinals. We'll see if that translates to anything else. I think the Ravens will figure their shit out too, and they'll be better. We'll get something better also from the Cleveland Browns. So yes, they did well on Sunday. They're atop the division, but I don't know how long it will last for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they're accustomed to playing in London, and this is actually the first time that they're staying back-to-back weeks across the pond, and this time they played the Buffalo Bills, who are coming off that great win against their division rivals in the Miami Dolphins. Really imposed their physicality on that speedy offense for the Miami Dolphins. Now, they did suffer some injuries. They're missing Tre'Davious White, who tore his Achilles, out for the year. They're coming into the game missing Greg Rousseau, and Von Miller did make his season debut, but is limited playing on a pitch count. And this defense has suffered a few more injuries. They lost Matt Milano, their great linebacker, who's arguably the second best off-ball linebacker behind Fred Warner, I think, in the NFL. Big loss there. And it's just going to be really difficult to make that up because as great as Epinesa was in that game, he is no Matt Milano. So they're going to have to pick up some slack, maybe make a trade, pick up somebody to at least help shore up that linebacking group. Defensive line, as great as it can be in certain points, Ed Oliver has been a pretty good, underrated defensive lineman, but it just wasn't there on Sunday across the pond, and maybe that's due to the lack of familiarity playing in London. But the Jaguars, for the most part, except for some self-inflicted mistakes in the red zone, were very dominant. Their offensive line was able to control the line of scrimmage on a consistent basis and eventually wore down that Bills front to allow Travis Etienne to run loose. There were two big touchdowns that basically put the game out of reach, and Trevor Lawrence found Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk on consistent basis, and this is probably since opening day the best the Jaguars offense has looked against an NFL opponent. So we're still in the works Great win by Jacksonville, picking up a win. Now they were entering this London trip at 1-2. They go to 3-2, and that's great, especially defensively. I think the way they were able to limit what the Bills offense wanted to do, they really frustrated Stephon Diggs. He lashed out again, threw his helmet down, threw tablets down consistently. I don't know exactly how that's going to translate going forward. There's just always times receivers want the ball because they know they can do something with it once they're given an opportunity. So I'm not going to fault Stephon Diggs there, but I'm going to give credit to that Jaguars defense for holding on, because for much of this game, they were up by 2 scores. That final margin 25-20 is a lot closer than it would be. And again, that's due to mistakes by Trevor Lawrence. There were 2 fumbles in plus side territory that came back to bite the Jaguars that made this game a lot closer than it really was. So again, I've always preached this to Trevor Lawrence throughout this year and even in years past, that ball security is my biggest knock on him. Consistently have to do that. Now, there were no interceptions, but he is a guy that has a fumbling problem, whether it's in inclement weather or just not feeling the pocket presence. He can sustain a sack, but you got to hold on to the ball. That's another thing. Despite the Bills' success last week, this was a very disappointing and honestly a missed opportunity by them to keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs. And just now with these defensive injuries, is going to be interesting to see how they navigate it moving forward, because the AFC is full of talented offenses. They still have yet to play the Kansas City Chiefs later this year, and they'll be due to play the Bengals later on. If that defense is still showing that it's fairly leaky, I don't know what even Josh Allen can do to overcome a patchwork defense in the Buffalo Bills. The Chicago Bears went into Thursday Night Football basically trying to salvage whatever respect they could get from their fan base and the rest of the NFL, where they came into the game 0-4. They blew a lead to the Denver Broncos to drop to 0-4 on the year. And I really thought that this was Matt Eberflus coaching for his job. It would have been a great opportunity if they were to lose this game, that they could fire him, integrate that new interim head coach into the system, and just ride out the year. It was actually an offensive explosion. We finally got to see what this DJ Moore and Justin Fields connection was meant to be. After 4 games, we saw a little bit, I think, a good output against the Denver Broncos in week 4, but in week 5, it was just an explosion. 8 catches, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. Could have been more if it wasn't thanks to a missed call, but still, they tore up that Washington defense to shreds. They won the game 40-20. This is sort of a homecoming for DJ Moore. He used to play for the Terps, and that was not too far from FedEx Field, but great way to show out in front of a crowd that used to support you during your college years. And this is something that Justin Fields can build on. In the last 2 games, he's thrown for 8 touchdowns and is amongst the top 3 candidates for passing touchdowns on the year. Very impressive stat line there. And now the thing is always the question of, he can do it with his legs, but can he do it with his arm? Yes, the Broncos and Commanders defenses are not the best, but he did take advantage of them and should have won maybe even 2 games instead of just a 1. It's just something to finally have some positive news seeing from the Bears, that they're not doomed to be a winless team. Of course, they still have a lot of work to do. I don't think they're making the playoffs by any means, but it's a nice step to salvage what they can do and further the development of Justin Fields. Now, to the other side, Washington looked like they were off to a great start. 2-0, but you got to remember the competition. Arizona Cardinals and Denver Broncos, 2 teams that are 1-win teams at this moment, a combined record of 2-8, and that is not really great competition. The 3rd game, you go up against the Buffalo Bills, get shellacked 37-3. You go up against the Eagles, lose in overtime, giving up 34 points, and then you give up another 40 to the lowly Bears, who've been struggling all year. That is 121 points in 3 games. And as much as people want to clamor for Ron Rivera's job, why not let's first talk about Jack Del Rio. Jack Del Rio, I think, has been always a solid defensive coordinator. He used to play in the NFL as well, but this defense, despite them having such great talent on that D-line, the secondary is not getting it done at all. They're getting moved all around. They can't really stick to anybody. It's just not looking good right now. Emmanuel Forbes is a smaller cornerback, and he can't even stick to guys. He may be fast, but he's biting on moves, just not really being in the vicinity of receivers, and it's just been a rough start to his career. I don't know if he can fix that later on, but that's something that Jack Del Rio and that defense has to fix. And remember, ownership is led by Magic Johnson and a whole other group, and they want results. They want a new face to this, and they didn't hire Ron Rivera. So not saying that he's on the hot seat, but that seat is definitely getting warmer. And if they don't fix anything, they could definitely clean house and just find somebody that they want to move forward in their regime to rebuild the Washington Commanders. It might be time for owner Robert Kraft to have a tough conversation with Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is probably going to go down as the best head coach of all time. He's done it time in and time out. Defensive guru, one of the best ever in shutting down countless offenses. But post Brady, it's been very bad. And with the exception of one postseason appearance, they didn't win that playoff game. They've been middle of the pack to now just being downright getting obliterated on back-to-back weeks. In the last two games, they've lost by a combined score of 72-3. That is unheard of for a Bill Belichick-led team, let alone a defense. Yes, they sustained injuries to Christian Gonzalez, who was promising in his rookie year, but it seems that he's done with the shoulder injury. And then you have Matthew Judon, who is a standout pass rusher, but he seems to be done for the year with a biceps injury. And it's not looking good. The defense can stop anybody. And then you're seeing what has happened to Mac Jones. Rookie year, he was looking very good, very on time, short completions, but very quick with the ball. The ball's getting out quick. Josh McDaniels leaves to take a job with the Vegas Raiders, and then you substitute that with Judge and Matt Patricia, who are guys that never are known for their offense, let alone their defense and special teams, but they were assigned to further the development of Mac Jones, and he's regressed massively since then. I think he's still a pretty good quarterback, but I just don't know what his ceiling is at this moment because he's regressed so far off his initial projection. Mac is a guy that can't be coached very hard, and that's maybe something that's hurt him as well. The locker room doesn't seem to back him either, as he's known to make some dirty plays, especially on defense, or just sliding down. He'll stick that foot up, and you don't hear players in that locker room coming into defense saying, that's not Mac at all, he's a clean player, etc., etc. It's rubbed players the wrong way, and maybe it just means that he needs a change of scenery. Now, there are people making recommendations to Robert Kraft. Don't fire him outright. Just take away his ability to make decisions in player personnel. And it's been bad. Countless misses. And that's something that Tom Brady was able to fix. He was so good, so meticulous that he was able to look at guys that aren't that great, not so many great receivers post Randy Moss, Wes Welker, and say, I'll carry you, I'll help you out and get you where you need to be and be part of this offense. I did have Gronk, but outside of that, the Patriots never really had great wide receivers. They were just part of that system. And post Tom Brady, these misses in the draft and weird free agent signings have been more indicative to what Bill Belichick has been doing. They've drafted kickers unnecessarily, just making wrong decisions to the wrong spots and not filling up the right holes. And that's where we're at today with this team. It's a mess. I think he's just such a rigid personality. That's just something he's part of. That is the culture he was brought into and grew up in. And it's very hard to undo those. So Bill, as great as he is, I would think this should be his last year as not only a director of player personnel for the New England Patriots, but also as a coach. He doesn't seem to have evolved, and he is just similar to what the Bears mindset is. It's just stuck in his ways, and they have to find a way to adapt. Otherwise, they're going to get left in the dust, because right now we're seeing that there's a huge gap between the Patriots and the rest of their division rivals in the AFC East. The New York Giants seem that they're stuck with Daniel Jones as their quarterback. They gave him the big contract in the offseason, and I think that was just under some fool's gold, because he only beat the Minnesota Vikings, and we know Kirk Cousins shrivels in the playoffs. it wasn't against a really good defense. That Minnesota defense is fairly toothless. They don't have a lot of scary folks out there. Their scheme is pretty simple. And he was able to slice and dice that for a win, a postseason win. That's a bargaining chip that he used to get that big contract. Giants fell for that. They should have just paid Saquon Barkley, maybe not the max dollars that he wanted, but something to secure him for long term, and then only given Daniel Jones the franchise tag. That's something we've been consistent here on this platform. And on Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks back in Week 4, he took 10 sacks and just was a guy that is seeing ghosts out on the football field, just not finding windows. He's taking off to run because he doesn't trust this offensive line. Yes, the offensive line is bad, and yes, it definitely makes you a little timid to sustain hits. Nobody likes getting laid out on a consistent basis, but there are still times that it's just very poor reads. These taking off and running before the play actually develops. And then a lot of these sacks are actually on him. He is holding onto the ball for too long. He is not really looking downfield, but then also not feeling that pocket presence where that pressure is coming from either. Daniel Jones has always been average, slightly above average at times, but it's always been around Saquon Barkley. And in these few games without him, he has struggled greatly without Saquon Barkley. This is the third consecutive game without him. And now he's out with an injury he sustained himself with that neck. He had a neck injury before in his career. I believe it was 2021. He missed the rest of the year due to that. I'm not sure if that's going to translate to anything this year. But the New York Giants, unfortunately, are stuck with this guy. And Brian Daboll doesn't seem to be this project that he works on. He wants a polished quarterback that he can use and run this offense that he has ideas for. And they are stuck with this big contract. They don't really have a way to get out of it maybe for another couple of years. And this is this typical Giants paying the price also for Dave Gettleman, their former GM that has made a lot of bad picks. And they're still finding ways to get out of that mess that he created. We all heard about the talk between Sean Payton as he took on the Denver Broncos job and his predecessor, Nathaniel Hackett, who is the current OC of the New York Jets. Yes, Nathaniel Hackett probably rode Aaron Rodgers' coattails a little bit to get him this head coaching gig. Yes, but it was not like Russell Wilson is completely an innocent party here. He was bad that whole year, and unfortunately it looked like Nathaniel Hackett had to pay the price for it. Sean Payton came in the offseason saying that is one of the worst coaching jobs he's ever been a part of, and now he has to clean that mess up that Nathaniel Hackett left for him. Nathaniel Hackett took the high road when questioned about it in the offseason. Respect to him for doing so. And I think this is typical what we see out of Sean Payton. He's great when things are going well. He can be a little smug. He can be a little bit rambunctious. It's a little extra, we'll say that. But when things go wrong, he's very quiet. At a 70-point outing against Miami, didn't really want to face the music there. I know you're offensive-minded, Sean, but it also means that you take care of both sides of the ball when you are a team's head coach. And on Sunday, we saw more struggles with this Denver defense. They gave up 24 points to Zach Wilson's led offense. They were able to force a turnover, but that was a red zone turnover. And that could have been much worse if they didn't get that red zone turnover. They allowed Breece Hall to run up and down the field for 177 yards, and it seems that Breece Hall is back because I don't really see a lot of restrictions there. Great to see that. But for a team that has been struggling against pretty much every other defense and Zach Wilson being questioned of whether or not he even belongs in this league, this was an opportunity for the Denver Broncos to get back and build off of some success that they had against the Bears last week. Now, Russell Wilson, for the most part, was actually running pretty effectively, passing the ball pretty effectively, but then the fourth quarter when he really needed to score, tried to scramble out, lost the ball, scoop and score. The game's basically over. And you got an earful from Sean Payton. It just looks like this is going to be a very long season for the Denver Broncos. They are lucky to be in this position at 1-4. And actually last year, Nathaniel Hackett had this team at 2-3 through 5 weeks. So I think there's got to be some type of tracker to see how well these Denver Broncos do compared to last season, because if it ends up that they're on the same or even worse than Nathaniel Hackett, it's not going to look good with those comments that he had earlier this year. I personally love all the ridicule, the pushback that he's getting, because that was very out of pocket. You don't really say that to other coaches in this. You know, he can say that he put his analyst hat on. You were a head coach, you were getting employed, you were getting paychecks from the Denver Broncos. That means you're insulting a fellow coach. Just out of pocket, and I'm glad the Jets kind of used this to band together. They're building off of that moral victory against the Kansas City Chiefs. Zach Wilson looks solid, looked better than he had those first 3 weeks, and now this offense with this running game starting to develop, they have a chance to build on some things. Now, they do play Philly next week. I think that's going to be a tough matchup for them. Not going to take them slightly by any means. I think that they're making some improvements. This is not the same team that Dallas played 2-3 weeks ago. This is a very different team. They're still learning, still developing, and it could be something to see there. Minnesota's falling apart. They are 1-4 through 5 games, and Chicago right now is tied with them in their own division at the bottom. And their defense just is completely toothless. They don't have any type of resistance, and it's just not looking good. You're seeing Kirk Cousins turn over the ball. They're just sloppy at the worst times possible, poorly mismanaged, this and that. And it's only a matter of time, because that NFL trade deadline is getting closer and closer. And it's about time you have a fire sale for the Minnesota Vikings. They have a lot of pretty nice pieces. You have Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, Harrison Smith, for example. And there are some tradable assets there just to get some picks, because I think this season is basically done. Coming back from 1-4 to even sniff the playoffs is asking a lot. They're so far back of the Detroit Lions, and even the Green Bay Packers, who have been up and down, have looked better than the Minnesota Vikings have through 5 games. Now, and I've never really seen a collapse, because this team was 13-4 last year, and now they have dropped down to 1-4, just looking for an entirely long season. Very interesting to see what happens. I don't know if the coach would get fired in this case. I just think they just need a reset. And that could just mean that the roster needs resetting, maybe not coaching or management. Now, for the Chiefs side of things, escaped what could have been a catastrophic injury to Travis Kelce. He's already a little banged up with that bone bruise, and now he seems to have hurt his ankle. Could be a high ankle sprain, and they have a short week against the Denver Broncos. I still think even without Travis Kelce, it's different this time. They should be able to handle the Denver Broncos at home, and I would believe that they can handle that to walk out of there with a victory, not put Travis Kelce at risk. Now, there was an interesting call in the fourth quarter. There was an instant where there was PI, and that wasn't really called because something or another. They picked up the flag, and it was on a 4th down conversion. A lot of people are saying this is the Taylor Swift stuff going on, because the NFL has gone haywire with this whole Taylor Swift mania, and I still don't think that it's that serious. I think this is just truly a conspiracy theory. Yes, the Chiefs have been benefactors of calls going their way, but those are superstar calls. I mean, Miami Heat with LeBron had calls go their way countless times. The best teams that have won on a consistent basis, that product is something that the leagues want to circulate through. So you're going to get some blown calls or missed calls that benefit those good teams. Mahomes has earned it. Travis Kelce has earned it. I'm not saying it's right. It's just something that is a weird thing of these businesses that are major league sports, and you're gonna have to deal with it one way or another. We don't need to blame this Taylor Swift stuff. That's beyond me there. It's interesting. It's something that where you can't pull off your helmet, that's automatic unsportsmanlike conduct. I don't know what happened there. I've seen instances though where players have pulled off their helmets and they don't get flagged. Go back to 2014 when Des Bryant came out. He wasn't even in the play. He came out with his helmet off and wasn't called for that. They also picked up the flag for that pass interference there that should have been given and helped the Detroit Lions get a win there. But nonetheless, the NFL has its agenda. Sometimes they may push that, but I don't think they're rigging games just to see Taylor Swift and her boyfriend ascend up the NFL standings. The Philadelphia Eagles traveled to SoFi Stadium, and this is their first time at this beautiful facility. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, in the entire NFL. And you would think it was an Eagles home game the way the crowd erupted every time the Eagles made a good play, because they drowned out whatever Rams fans were there. Very good performance, I think, by the Eagles. It was probably one of their best of the year. It marks the season debut of Cooper Kupp, who was missing the first 4 games due to a strained hamstring, and this allowed Puka Nacua to blossom into a household name, to say the least. Easily one of the guys that are up there for that Offensive Rookie of the Year award between him and probably CJ Stroud. There was this tape rolling that, are they even the same cusp because he's a clone or something because they operate out of the slot. I saw the tape where they were doing this ladder drill, and Cooper Kupp has such quick feet. It's unreal. And yes, Puka Nacua was quick himself, but it was night and day, man. We forget how good Cooper Kupp is. In that 2021 season, he just ran so many excellent routes. He's getting himself open because of his quick feet, and that's something very underrated that we don't really appreciate either. Nonetheless, this game really put my antenna up, because as great as the Eagles offense looked to start, especially establishing Dallas Goedert, who has been kind of an afterthought in the early part of the season, he finally had a 100-yard performance, his first touchdown. Great to see that. But the defense, again, is showing that I'm a little worried about because of that secondary. It's been patchwork, a lot of moving parts, and now we finally have the original starters out there, but the slot corner has been a little bit of a moving part. So this time they put in Bradley Roby, but not to start, at least, because he's just coming off of the practice squad. And Cooper Kupp in the first half was going off. He had 6 catches for 95 yards, eventually went over 100. Puka Nacua had a great touchdown on Bradbury, and I was worried because even Cooper Kupp went against Darius Slay, who seems to be losing a little bit of a step. I hate to say that, but he's just not the same guy as he used to be. But it was a worrisome thing because these receivers are so good, and there are a lot of teams with multiple good receivers out there, and if our best guys like Bradbury and Slay can't stay with them, it's a little bit concerning. Now, that touchdown to Puka Nacua was just a dime by Matthew Stafford. I'm not going to really blame James Bradbury on that. It was just really good play. Good defense, better offense, as Mark Jansen used to say. But this did allow the Eagles to have an opportunity. It was late in the first half, 32 seconds, and a lot of teams, they maybe kneel down, they maybe run one play, see what they can do, call a timeout, and then go for it. But the Eagles really gunned for it from the beginning, and then a great couple of plays by A.J. Brown had a great amount of yak yards and drew a horse collar tackle, tack on 15 more, and then drew a PI in the end zone to set up first and goal to 1. Now, by this point, you only have 2 seconds left, so it's a do or die. And I'm a little conservative sometimes. I want the points, go into halftime just down a point. But I forgot, though, that the Eagles have this unstoppable play, the brotherly shove, the tush push. And if you need a yard, the Eagles will get it because of this great offensive line and this great quarterback who can squat 600 pounds. And people are going to continue to push back on it. I don't really care. Should not be outlawed just because other teams get hurt doing it. It's because of poor execution and lack of talent. I'll just leave it at that. Eagles tush push gets it done, 17-14. And that's a huge momentum shift for this team that was kind of struggling to start off. And then major credit to Sean Desai for making second half adjustments. They pitched a defensive second half shutout, 3 sacks. Jalen Carter is a monster who we'll talk about a little bit later, but I wouldn't say shut down the 2 receivers. They still got some decent looks, but it mainly was the pressure that was in Matthew Stafford's face. He was very good at completing passes in that first half. The second half, it caused his percentage to drop to below 60%. Kind of unheard of for Matthew Stafford. They sacked him 3 times, like I said, in the second half, and it's good to see a healthy Hassan Reddick because Hassan is a guy that's so crucial to this Eagles defensive front. Yes, you have Josh Sweat, but Hassan Reddick is really the best edge rusher amongst the rest of that talented defensive line. And he came into training camp and preseason with a thumb injury, and he played the first 3 weeks with a thumb cast. That, I don't know how much that really limits your play, but for him it did. Cast comes off for the Commanders game. He gets a sack there, first one of the year. And then the second game, back-to-back sacks to really seal the deal, end this game. And, I mean, the Eagles are just so hyped. It's just such a team that's so channeled together, and I just love seeing Reddick get into it yet again. And let's give a shout out to Jeff Stoutland. They're coming into this game missing their starting right guard, Cam Jurgens, who is definitely needed when you're going against Aaron Donald, who is one of the best defensive tackles, if not the best of all time. And remarkably, in 5 games since Aaron Donald has entered the league against the Philadelphia Eagles, he has yet to register a sack against the Eagles quarterback. And that's all when Jeff Stoutland was the offensive line coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Just phenomenal stuff. That is, of course, major credit to Jason Kelsey, who's probably going up against him head-to-head, but those guards are very important. He went up against Brandon Brooks earlier. Now it's Sua Opeta, who only had 1 start to his name prior to this matchup. And to coach guys that are maybe not as talented, but just so good because he knows offensive line play so well, that's what the Eagles do. They build in the trenches, and that's a big credit to Jeff Stoutland there. We didn't hear anything from Aaron Donald in this game. Very clean game from the offensive line there. And on the other side, Jalen Carter had 2 big sacks. That's his first time having a multi-sack game. And like I said, he's continuing to wreak havoc. He's just scraping the surface right now. He has 3.5 sacks through 5 games. I think he is the favorite to be the defensive rookie of the year. He's graded habitually on Pro Football Focus as the best defensive tackle week after week. Just so disruptive. He's shredding double teams. He is throwing Matthew Stafford with such ferocity, but still within the legal rules, because it's obviously could be a personal foul, but just studies film so good. And it's just so good to have him on our team. And maybe it's a handing of the torch moment between Aaron Donald, who seems to be falling from his prime, still very good, but is not the same guy as he used to be, to a guy that is ascending to maybe being one of the premier defensive linemen from that interior standpoint in the NFL. On Sunday Night Football, we had a matchup of 2 historic rivals. We're getting an OG throwback to the 90s and 80s even, between the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. Once again, though, the San Francisco 49ers, at least in this recent edition in the 2020s, have beaten the Dallas Cowboys. Now, that's 2 postseason matchups and this big regular season matchup in 2023. It's led by great quarterback play by Brock Purdy, and then you have great defensive play by their leader of their defense in Fred Warner, who is the best linebacker in football. Such a game changer. Forced a turnover off a punch out that resulted in a fumble recovery, and then had a pick himself, had a sack on Dak Prescott, just doing a little bit of everything. Pass rushing, playing sideline to sideline, getting interceptions, is so talented. And that is a big factor why the San Francisco 49ers defense is just so tenacious. Right now, Dallas and Dak in particular are just not good enough. They don't have the right to the seat at the table amongst the NFL's elite, let alone the NFC's elite. It's pretty clear that it's the 49ers, the Eagles, and the Dallas Cowboys. That's no disrespect to them. It's just that we have the tape. They've lost to the Arizona Cardinals and just got thumped by the 49ers. Even in last year's edition, they were able to make it a 1-possession game, but this time they were outscored 42-10. And in each time, you see Dak Prescott just fail to come and live up to those expectations with that big contract. He's a guy that's making a ton of money, and he's getting outclassed by Brock Purdy in back-to-back matchups with this 49ers team. Brock Purdy is making less than $1 million a year, mind you, as a 7th-round draft pick. Emmanuel Acho had one of the best metaphors I've seen recently. The Dallas Cowboys are like this high school bully that they're great on beating up on that little guy, you know, the nerdy kid, the smaller kid from band. And then when the bully meets a guy on the wrestling team or the football team, they get a little scared, they get a little timid, and then they're getting outclassed in that physicality standpoint. And we saw that again today. The 49ers have multiple dogs, multiple guys that are just slit your throat, cold-blooded killers. And Micah is a guy that talks on that podcast that he has on Bleacher Report every Monday. And he even talked after saying they're still on that level. No, you're not at all. Micah, I think, is a little bit overrated, actually, if I'm not being too outlandish here, because great at pass rushing. But even TJ Watt, even Nick Bosa are good at setting edges against the run. They play the run pretty well. They can blow up plays, not just from pass rushing standpoints. On Sunday night, I saw a lot of times where it was run situations, and Micah wanted no part of it. There was a lack of intensity there, and just not playing to that standard that we thought he was at a first-team All-Pro. He's great at coming off the edge and getting sacks. That is his calling card. But he is no Lawrence Taylor if he's only relying on pass rushing stats. You got to play the run as well. And he went head-to-head against Trent Williams, another first-team All-Pro, one of the best left tackles, if not the best left tackle in the NFL still to this day. And that's a clash of the Titans right there. Yet again, though, Trent Williams owned Micah Parsons. And even against the Eagles, you'll see Micah Parsons struggle against Lane Johnson when they go head-to-head. So against those bigger matchups, he hasn't been that same guy. I'm curious to see what he says this week. And the Cowboys have a chance to respond against the LA Chargers. We'll see, because they've been up and down. But I have a lot to learn about the Dallas Cowboys. They're not who we thought they were after two great performances against the New York teams. They now need to play some interesting, more difficult opponents as their schedule ramps up. And I don't think they're up to that tier, because right now the 49ers are a team that I think are the best team in the NFL. They've blown out consistently good teams. They look unbeatable from both sides of the ball. I think Brock Purdy's an MVP candidate through 5 weeks, and we'll see what happens. But San Francisco's the best team, and Dallas looks like a pretender. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. We got more subscribers. We're slowly growing this YouTube channel. I'm loving it so far. If you're new, though, please do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out grow and extend this out to other people who are not as familiar with Spectator Sports. And you can get our audio from Spotify. Check out our Instagram and TikTok page. And thank you so much to Joey for editing this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.